Talktainment Radio, worldwide sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Okay, good morning, and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is Radio the Way It Should Be Heard. It's been a week since we've spoken, so we are glad to be back on the air. And first of all, Mr. Fuller, live from Washington, D.C., how are you this morning?
I'm still learning.
In the news, or this week, as you have observed what has gone on for the last couple of weeks, is there anything that is pressing that you would like to discuss or make mention to our listeners?
Nothing specific, just a generality of things, because the culture needs to be changed. I've been thinking about black culture and white culture all along, and I mention it periodically on this program, and I think about it all the time, because there has to be a fundamental change in what we call black culture and white culture in order to alter the landscape between people. And first of all, we go with definitions. What we call white culture basically is white supremacist culture. That's why you have a lot of anguish about the Confederate flag and what it means and what it doesn't mean and what it should mean. And people talk about it in vague terms, particularly white people. They will talk about it within terms of, well, it's our heritage. We have to honor our dead, and the people who fought for what they believed in, and that is the Southern heritage. I mean, which has nothing to do with slavery. It just has to do with we like to think of the people who have gone before us and the struggles they went through and the anguish that they had to put up with, and the individual soldiers and their courage under fire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But basically what they're saying is we're talking about preserving a system of white supremacy. And that's really what it's all about when you strip it down. If you take away the white supremacist factor, you wouldn't have all that reenactment and whatnot. It wouldn't be all that pride, because if you're going to look at it as just soldiers and heritage and the how soldiers interact with each other and the battles and whatnot and the anguish of going through what you go through with on the battlefield and whatnot, you can say that about the Japanese soldiers in Okinawa. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might as well just fly the Japanese battle flag, in Mississippi. Why not? Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, they showed a lot of valor. Iwo Jima, a very small place in World War II, where many thousands of people died. So you can have the Japanese battle flag right alongside the Marine flag, and say that they are equal, because they were all people who were fighting, and for each other, really. They had nothing to do with politics and ideology and economics and all of that, or aggression. It had to do with soldiers on the battlefield and what soldiers have to go through. And yes, I can understand that viewpoint in that context, mm-hmm. but that's really not what it's all about. It's mm-hmm. about white supremacy. That's white culture.
Yes.
If you put that white in front of culture, that word white, and then you say, now give it a definition. White culture is white supremacy, which means mistreating people who have color in their skin.
Yes.
Dominating and mistreating people who have color in their skin for fun, for glory, and for material gain. In simple language, that's all that it is, and there's nothing else there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
One of the things that my team discussed this week was we came up with this statement that you can take down a flag, but if it's not within the heart of a man to do that which is right, then what did you really accomplish? Can you address that?
Absolutely nothing, except it's a reminder. Sometimes it's a constant reminder, so it's probably a plus. Take the flag down, but if people take it down reluctantly, that doesn't necessarily change them, except over a period of time they may change by not being reminded of the flag because they don't see it anymore.
But that is
out of sight, out of mind. So it might have that effect. We'd have to see if that plays out. But if they're still going to be flying it from their porches and all like that, they're just identifying themselves as people who believe in white supremacy. And that might be a plus, or it might be a minus. I don't know. It depends on how you want to look at it.
Okay, or flying the flag in your heart.
Yes, or believing in white supremacy
that's
without flying a flag, which is even worse because now you're undercover.
You're undercover, absolutely. Okay, let's go to the phone line. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to get in contact with the show, and I do apologize for not doing that, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766, and that'll get you on the air. Or you could Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. I'm not going to say that I'll get to your comment today, but at some point I will fix it so that that we can address that. Galen, let me have the first caller here. Caller, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question?
Hi. Thank you so much. And thank you. It's an honor to speak to you, Mr. Fuller, and you, Bobby. You all are really doing a wonderful job. The question that I want to ask is how an organization that already has an agenda and that has a program, how would you suggest that we utilize your book to better, advance what we do?
Okay.
Well, the book is addressed to individual persons, so just like a cookbook or any type of auto repair book, it's basically a manual, and it's basically a repair book. It's called the compensatory code, meaning you're making up for what's missing, and what's missing is a repair job on all the damage that's being done. So we need tools for making repairs, just like you would repairing a refrigerator or a stove or a vehicle. And so you need tools for doing that. And the tools in this particular case are words, because from words come ideas, and from ideas can come action that will do the repair job. So there's a lot of repairs to be made. So if a person is in an organization or associated with people, which an organization is, just an association of people, you try to do something that will repair whatever damage is being done, and then also try to replace, that's the law of compensation, whatever you remove with something that is better. So how that comes about in everyday interaction between people, which is what my work is addressed to, everyday action between people, thought, speech, and action. People are speaking to each other. They're interacting with each other all day long, everywhere. So you just use whatever is in the book to, first of all, find out what a problem is for each individual. All individual persons have problems. We're given problems when we come into the world, okay? So That's the assumption, and that's the evidence. So you just address whatever problems people have and try to solve those problems in the best possible manner. Mm-hmm. Those two words are the only words you really need in order to stay focused. Problem solving. We're here on the planet to solve problems. Why would I come to that conclusion? Because we all have problems. So evidently, problem solving is what we're here for. And so what problems do you solve? The ones right in front of you at the moment. Whatever problem you're dealing with right at the moment. And you want to do that in the most constructive manner. Because everything is either going to be constructive or non-constructive. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to someone and they say, I have a problem, first thing you should think about, what is the problem? And what is the most constructive way to solve that problem? Mm-hmm. It might be 36 ways to solve the problem. But you want to solve the problem, and this is a part of the code, too. Solve problems without making any. Yes. Solve problems without making any.
Yes, and the first order of business is to ask questions.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the problem? That'd be the first question.
What is the problem? And then you can go ahead on from there. Caller, before we let you go, did you have another question or comment?
Yeah, I do, but it's a little, I don't know if I should ask this question, but looking at the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, so if we were to structure ourselves around that and the Constitution, that does cause the problem for them. If we took it to that level and realized that we didn't want to be 14th Amendment subject citizens, because that's not who we are.
Okay. Thank you for your...
and thank you. Thank
you're
you
welcome.
Very, very much.
All righty. Mr. Fuller, you want to address that before we go to a station ID?
I didn't quite get the question.
It was about the 5th and 14th Amendment.
Oh, 5th and 14th Amendment.
Yes.
Oh, sure. That's mostly applying to job situations. That's what you absolutely should rely on. If you're having any problem on the job, you should bring up, well, do we have a constitutional violation here? All right. Mm-hmm. And if someone is being accused of something or if someone is being mistreated, first thing you want to go to is the 5th and 14th Amendment to the Constitution. That's in the Northwestern Hemisphere. And you want to do everything based on that. 5th Amendment is due process, meaning did you go about doing everything the correct way without skipping over anything, without adding anything or taking away anything? Did you go about doing everything the correct way? And the second, 14th Amendment is equal protection. Is everybody being treated the same?
Okay.
And you keep that in mind all the time and raise that question. Mm-hmm. Don't accuse anybody of anything. Just raise those questions.
Yes, sir. Okay, you're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainMedRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and if you would like to get in contact with the show, you may do so by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and we will make every effort to get your question addressed by Mr. Fuller. Going to the email or Gmail, we have one from Salathiel. The question is, Mr. Fuller, you often mention logic comes with the universe. Do you believe logic can be defined as whatever a person or group believes it is to meet their needs? Therefore, could there be many forms of logic?
Yes, there are two forms of logic, constructive and non-constructive. You can use logic to do something that is very non-constructive, and you can use logic to do something that is very constructive. Always measure everything by constructive, non-constructive. That is, any move that you make, anything that you say, does it have a constructive result or a non-constructive result? Those are the two forms of logic. Yes, you can be logical about anything, but it's going to take one of those two forms. It's either going to have a constructive result or a non-constructive result. You always want any logic that you use to produce a constructive result.
Okay. All righty. Before we go to the next call, we have a question from Edward, and he asks this. It says, Hotep, Mr. Bob, and Mr. Fuller, my question is in the area of sexual play, intercourse, and or confusion. On page 39 of the textbook where Mr. Fuller writes about white supremacists having a dominant functional control or influence over sexual expressions and or desires of other persons, animals, etc., is Mr. Fuller talking about bestiality among people who classify themselves as white? And can he, if he can, educate on the clause or elucidate on the clause and need for that type of behavior? And how is it connect with the treatment or mistreatment of non-white people?
Well, what you want is the best sexual expression, because non-white people are supposed to be trying to find the best arrangement sexually that people can possibly have. And I would say, in order to qualify for what I say ultimately would be universal man with universal woman, first thing you do, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
First thing you do is get that in order. That has never been in order. And the premise is, according to what I've written, based on what I think is correct logic, is that none of these sexual expressions that we have now, none of the interactions that we call sexuality, including all the new categories of sexuality, are as they should be. First of all, you haven't gotten the male-female thing straight yet.
No.
And now that's in a mess. And then with all the new sexualities that are being added, omnisexuality, transgender sexuality, supersexuality, confuser sexuality, you got every type of sexuality you can name. You're going to have added numbers, I guess unlimited numbers of sexuality now. And you haven't even got the male-female thing straight yet. None of that is as it ought to be. I mean, it's never gotten down. And under the system of white supremacy, you can't get it correctly. All the sexualities under the system of white supremacy is not the way it ought to be. Sometimes people ask me, well, what's the best arrangement just between male and female? I say, there's no way you can get it the way it ought to be. Not under the system of white supremacy. Why? Because it's poisoned by the system of white supremacy, because the system of white supremacy is all about deception and mistreatment.
Yes.
See what I mean?
Yes.
So that spills into every area of activity, including all of the activities of non-white people.
Okay.
So there's no way to get it the way that it ought to be under the system.
Okay.
You do the best you can in male and female interaction, but you have to get rid of the system of white supremacy in order for any sexuality to be there the way it ought to be.
Okay. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, radio the way it should be heard. You can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Going on that page 39, you wrote the most destructive act committed by white supremacists against non-white people are, and you have three: sexual intercourse, sexual play, and or sexual function. Then you went on to explain, next to white supremacy, that is racist itself, sexual activity is the second strongest motivating force among the people of the known universe. Then you went on to say the persons who have dominant functional control or influence over the sexual expressions and or desires of other persons, animals, etc., also have dominant control over the basic motives of those same persons in other areas of expressions, including, and then you went on to say, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war. And then you said any white person who engages in sexual intercourse with a non-white person under conditions dominated by white supremacy has done more to promote the maintenance, expansion, and or refinement of white supremacy than he or she could have done by any other means. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that type of sexuality, in other words, sexual intercourse between a white person and a black person, for example, under the system of white supremacy, perpetuates white supremacy because it nourishes what is strong already. You have to get rid of the system of white supremacy. Then white and black can have sexual intercourse with each other in a constructive manner. Mm-hmm. But that has to be under certain kinds of control on account of, over a period of time, white people will become nervous, which presumably, according to the record, is what they did before, about regenerating or reproducing white people. So you want to preserve all species if you are a correct thinking person. That is, all species that are not what you call, in essence, completely destructive. Now, some people say that white people, just by being white, are completely destructive people, that they can't be trusted, they don't have any business on the planet.
That's not true.
I don't know whether that is true or not, but that can be tested. Maybe I've heard some white people, back in the old days particularly, say that black people are some type of misfits that never should have been on this planet in the first place.
And that's not true.
Yes. See, so it has been shown that all people can be productive.
Now, that's true.
Yes, and the record shows that. All people can do constructive things, but it has to be within a certain context, because people can also do non-constructive things, and that's been proven. People can, white people can kill people, black people can kill people, and the record shows that both black people and both white people have killed white and black and killed each other.
And kill each other.
Okay?
Right.
So where's the proof that, that people don't have this capability, that black people are completely pure, is completely incapable of doing anything that's incorrect, and that white people are the same way, or just the reverse, that all of us are super pious, or that none of us are, or whatever. But see, I'm saying you have the mindset starting out, since we really don't know for sure, just saying, let's try this thing called justice in a serious manner, and just stop running around trying to say who's inferior and who is should be supreme over another,
right.
and on and on and on. Let's try this thing called justice. Which you guarantee that nobody's mistreated, and guarantee that everybody is preserved.
Right. Okay. Listen. You want to make sure you get a copy of the book that is the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller Jr., and you can get that by going to producejustice.com. That is producejustice.com. And all the information is there on how to obtain the book, and also an additional for purchase word guide, which will help you understand the code. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 3, Galen. Oh, line number 2? Okay, line number 2, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller. What is your question?
Yes, hello. I'm Tyreek from the Bronx. My question to Mr. Fuller, I heard him mention earlier in the show of the Confederate flag and the Congress voting to take it down. I just would like to point out to people that this is one of the tricks of the white supremacists. They'll make people believe that they've actually accomplished something in getting rid of racism, white supremacy, all the while the people in the Congress are the ones that we should be looking at, not the flag. And so yesterday on my job, I'm a porter. I was making some garbage bags, and a white man who seemed to be like homeless was reaching into the garbage bags, and instantaneously, I thought of Mr. Fuller, how he said this would be a sacrifice, as in you would see more and more white people hungry and on the street and destitute positions, and it would appear that white supremacy is over. Yet, this is a setup to train the masses into thinking that it's all over. And so I was saying that they were doing the same thing with the Confederate flag. They took it down to make people think that they have won another battle in the fight against white supremacy, but it's still here and kicking. And my question to Mr. Fuller is, how can we teach people that these are part of their tricks? How can we enlighten people using the compensatory logic and the code into making people believe that this is much deeper than they perceive?
Okay. Mr. Fuller, you want to address that, please?
Just by telling people that it's not over until it's over. That's the only measure.
Right.
The correct measure is not, in yardage like playing football. We shouldn't measure progress like that. There's no such thing as racial progress. You either have it or you don't. That's the only way to look at it. This is 2015. You either have racism or you don't. Now, as long as you have it, you have it. There's no such thing as, well, it's getting better. No, it's not better till it's over. All of it.
I agree.
It's not better till it's over. That's the only measure we should have. Don't start talking about a black president or none of that. We haven't even got started, because we look at it from, you either have it or you don't. As long as you have one person practicing racism effectively on this planet, then we have racism on the planet, period. And we don't measure it by how many people are doing well and numbers of black people per year who have jobs and the number of black people who are being let out of prison and all like that. You either have white supremacy or you don't. Now, do you or don't you? And as long as you have it, no progress. That's how you measure it. There's been no progress at all. Zero. We need to get out of that whole mentality of we measured about, 20 years ago, we were on the 10-yard line. Now we're on the 30-yard line.
Yeah.
Oh, it's celebration time. Yeah. No, none of that foolishness.
Okay.
None of that foolishness. Why? Based on logic. It never should have been in the first place.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Brother Tariq from New York. Thank you for your call. On the other side of the break, we have more of your calls, and good subject today, talking about the Confederate flag and whatever your questions are for Mr. Neely Fuller on the compensatory concept on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio the way it should be heard.
TalkTainmentRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTainmentRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTainmentRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is TalkTainmentRadio.com.
Hello, I'm Lisa Stockdale from Senior Agenda, and I would like to encourage you to visit the Worthington Retirement Community here in Central Ohio. I've had the privilege of working closely with the staff and residents over at the Worthington for the past couple of years, and I can promise you they make a wonderful community. If you or a loved one are considering retirement living, you'll want to pay them a visit before you make your next move. When you choose to join the Worthington, you'll gain the peace of mind that comes from knowing that their independent retirement lifestyle simplifies your retirement living. They take care of the cooking, shopping, and cleaning so that you can focus on the things that are truly important to you. Plan to visit the Worthington today. They're conveniently located at 1201 Riva Ridge Boulevard in Gahanna, Ohio. You can call or have to schedule a tour at 614-933-8640 or just stop in. Be sure to tell them Lisa sent you and enjoy your retirement living.
The Glory Soul Food Cafe, a taste of Southern classic, located at 3350 Allegheny Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. They've got everything you need. The famous LaGlory burger, chicken and waffles, shrimp and grits, walleye, perch, and whiting, and fish dinners, all Southern style food.
Oh boy, what good eating!
LaGlory's Soul Food Cafe, a taste of Southern classic, located at 3350 Allegheny Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. Be sure to tell them that All in Our Family sent you, and you will receive an extra side dish with each meal. LaGlory's Soul Food Cafe, a taste of Southern classic, located at 3350 Allegheny Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. For carry-out, call 614-237-5844. Get the menu at LaGlory'sCafe.com. Open 7 days a week.
For the best eating in town, LaGlory.
Peace Corps. Life is calling. How far will you go? To find out more, call 1-800-424-8580 or visit peacecorps.gov.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Go ahead. Make my day.
You got the power.
You're in touch with the compensatory concept. TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. live from Washington, D.C. I'm your co-host, Mr. Bobby, emanating here from Columbus, Ohio. We've been talking about the Confederate flag and a bunch of other subjects that have come up. Mr. Fuller will address whatever question that you may have. And if you'd like to get in contact with the show, you may do so by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Before we go to the phone lines, we have a question from Freedom Fighter. It says, Mr. Fuller, should victims of white supremacy help white people who admit to being racist? Outside of being courteous, I'm saying helping them, like open doors for them, donate to their causes, help them change tires, just random help. And then I've also heard stated that sexual relationships between victims of white supremacy and white people is not a good idea. What about having white friends in the system of white supremacy? Okay.
Well, it depends on what you mean by friend. As long as a person is doing something constructive, that's the only measure, whether it's white or non-white. The only question you have when you interact with someone is this interaction constructive? And if it is constructive, how is it constructive?
Asking questions again.
Yes, that's all you have to do. That's the only criteria. And so you don't have to put, abstract labels on it like friendship and all like that, or, just say this thing that we're fixing to do together, or we're doing it in the presence of each other, or we are doing it with each other, quote, unquote, whatever that means. Is it going to produce a constructive result, or is it not? And that's whether you're with someone who is white, or someone who is non-white.
That can go for anybody.
Yes, I mean, that's the only thing that keeps you focused, so that you're not rambling all over the place and getting lost in language and the words that are being used, because words can be very confusing. Are you my friend? Or why are you people so antisocial? You say, well, hey, I'm not antisocial, or maybe I am antisocial. What do you mean by that? So let's just say, let's keep it real focused and just say, wait a minute, are we going to do something constructive, or are we going to do something non-constructive? Which is it?
Okay.
What is this thing that we are going to do? Before we do it, let's get that straight. Is it going to have a constructive result, or is it going to have a non-constructive result? And if the result is going to be constructive, how is it going to be constructive?
There you go, asking questions again.
That's all.
All right, and then the first part of the question, he mentioned about help. Should victims of white supremacy help white people who admit to being racist outside of being courteous? Should they help them open up the doors, or donate to their causes, or help them change tires? Just random help to white people.
If it's constructive, yes.
If it's
you always try to do something that's constructive.
Okay.
In other words, something that shows that you have constructive intent.
Okay.
But now, if it goes into something that's non-constructive, if they say, well, why don't you come to our lawn parties and all like that? Well, is your lawn party going to be constructive? And if so, how? What are you going to be doing at that lawn party?
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
If it has a constructive result, I'll be there.
I'll be there.
I mean, but you have to show me what you're going to be doing that has of constructive value.
Show me what you're working with. Okay. All right, Freedom Fighter, we did ask your question, and Mr. Fuller did address it. Okay, let's go to line number 1. Okay, line number 1, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question?
My question is,
hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Non-constructive results regarding the celebrities like Bill Cosby, Tiger Woods, entering into a non-constructive sexual deviant behaviors. Did this cause their downfall, and was that because they brought into white supremacy?
Okay, Mr. Fuller, did you hear that?
Well, without being addressing specific persons, I'll say what the code says. Any sexual play or any sexual intercourse or so-called anti-sex, which is includes homosex, and all of that other, between white and non-white during the existence of white supremacy is considered to be non-constructive activity. Why? Because it's happening under the system of white supremacy. And that means it nourishes the system of white supremacy by doing what? It causes confusion.
Yes.
See, that's the thing. See, the white supremacists thrive off of confusion. And so it's the same type of interaction you will have between what you might call, that would classify child abuse. The non-white person would be the victim of child abuse because non-white people are in captivity under the system of white supremacy. We're prisoners of war, so it's like the warden, which would be the white person, would be the warden in that particular case, taking advantage, sexual advantage, of a prisoner. You don't want that type of arrangement. That's not the correct type of arrangement. Sexual intercourse is supposed to take place between equals. And since the prisoner of war is not equal to the warden, then the prisoner of war is being sexually abused. And you make another parallel, since non-white people in the system of white supremacy have been put in a childlike position, then that's child abuse on the part of the white person who is involved.
Okay.
Regardless of how they feel emotionally. It's not an emotional thing. It's business.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, caller, for your call. That was a good question. All righty. Let's go to line number, what is it, line number 3? Okay. Before we go, you are listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainMedRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard. You can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will try to get your comment or your question to be addressed by Mr. Fuller. And also you can get his book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller Jr., by going to producejustice.com. That is producejustice.com. And there's also an additional word guide for purchase that you may also obtain to help you understand the compensatory codes. Okay, line number 3. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question?
Yes, how are you doing today?
Good, sir.
I'm calling to, first of all, thank you and Mr. Fuller for hosting this show every week. And I have one question for Mr. Neely Fuller. I live in Detroit, and the current economic status of Detroit is pretty bad. I mean, black people aren't doing too well here at all. And from my observations, there's been a lot of parasitism from other minorities, Indians, Asians, and Arabs that come into the community and set up businesses to benefit them, but not the community at large. So my question to Mr. Neely Fuller would be, would non-white people actively working towards white supremacy be considered white supremacists or non-white people? Thank you.
Okay, wait a minute. Mr. Fuller?
If I understand correctly, he's talking about the categories of non-white people.
Was that... Yeah. Okay, caller. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller. All right. Thank you, caller.
Yes, if I understand correctly, he's talking about the conflicts that come between non-white people themselves. Well, that's all engineered by the white supremacists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes black people will say, well, we got these, I don't know about the Hispanics, and you got these Asians coming in, and they're doing this, and some of them are kind of hostile toward black people and whatnot. We're all non-white. We are categorized as non-white.
Yes.
The white supremacists orchestrate all of these conflicts, and they do it all over the world because that's one of the secrets to their power, if you can call it a secret, and that is keep the non-white people, black, brown, red, yellow, as long as they are considered non-white, keep them in disarray. Mm-hmm. Keep them at each other's throats. Black people themselves. I mean, if we start talking about the Indians that run the filling stations and whatnot, the people who are called Indians from India or Pakistan or someplace like that, quote unquote, and we say, well, they're kind of hostile toward the black people. They're not courteous. I mean, they look at us with hostility and all like that. They act like we're going to steal something. Okay, this is all set up by the white supremacists. The white supremacists are in charge of all of that. Those people wouldn't be running those filling stations at all if the white supremacists didn't say that they could run them. They're just trying to, make a living and trying to keep people from stealing things off the counter, which is what black people do when they run the place. All right? It's no difference. However, most black people go out of business because there's so much stealing going on. I mean, finally, they just throw up both hands and give up. And then the place is just a vacant lot again. So, but the white supremacists instigate all of that. They set that up, and they want it like that. Yes. They want the non-white people at each other's throats, and then they orchestrate. They hide behind the bush and laugh at all of them because they say, we keep them fighting. Keep the black people, the young black people, dropping out of school and joining gangs and killing each other, killing the neighbors, killing the very fellows that they dropped out of school with. That's who they are killing.
Yes.
I mean, keep them at it. I mean, have them doing it all round the clock in Chicago and Cleveland and wherever they happen to be. I mean, in Nigeria, in South Africa.
All over the world.
Yeah, all over the world. Keep it nonstop. Keep them going at each other. I mean, that makes our work easy.
All righty. Okay. Before we go to the phone lines, we have a question from Robin, and she says that Mr. Fuller, during a previous show, you discussed adoption of non-white children into white families, saying it would make the child, quote, more of a victim, end of quote, than they would ordinarily be in the system of white supremacy. But statistics show that non-white children are least likely to be adopted, and oftentimes they languish in orphanages and in many cases never get adopted, and that has shown to have negative effects on them as well. There is a worldwide epidemic of non-white children living in squalor or poverty. My question, Mr. Fuller, would it be unjust for these non-white children to be adopted by white persons who provide a nourishing and stable home environment?
Well, it depends on what you mean by that tricky word, adoption.
Neutering,
neutering.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? We have all been adopted. It just depends on how they adopt us. Now, some of them, they bring into the house, just like on the plantation. It's the same old system. Take some of the Negroes that's down there in the slave shacks and bring them up to the big house and make them special. All right? It's the same old system on a grand scale.
Okay.
But leave the rest of them down there languishing. I mean, in poverty and all like that. Sure, I mean, because that's the way the system is set up. But to show that you have your heart is in the correct place, rather than just abolish the slave system altogether, where everybody is taken care of, which is what they don't want to happen. See, what they will do is say, well, I'm going to select a few thousand or a few million black people out of all of the millions. I'm going to select maybe 1 million out of all of the millions and millions and millions. Mm-hmm. And we're going to bring them up to the big house and take care of them and pamper them, really. I mean, and raise them in a decent fashion. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, make sure that all the rest of them are left down there in those shanties, down by the river, in complete poverty, complete disarray, complete despair. I mean, it's just the same old system in a more sophisticated manner. So that so-called adoption thing is just the same as showcasing. Okay. It's the same as taking a black president and putting him out front. Okay. I mean, you know, and saying, hey, that takes care of it.
Yeah. All righty. Okay, Galen, see, let's go to line number 2. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. on the compensatory concept with Mr. Bobby as co-host. What is your question?
Hello, can I be heard, Mr. Bobby?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is my question. First of all, it's an honor to have this question from Mr. Fuller. I listen to him, from week to week, and been listening to him for a few years now.
Hurry up.
And he's been changing my mind. All right, but this is the question I have. It's actually a 2-part question, but kind
Hurry
of the
up,
same.
man. Get to it.
All right, even though money, is supposed to be important and education as well, the fact that money comes from a bad idea, how important is it to try to create a new idea of value for black people to identify themselves with? And then I will ask the same in education because, since they're, legalizing all the homosexual stuff and all of this, you know what I'm saying, they're going to have some kind of curriculum where, they're teaching kids about, oral and anal sex and all of this and that, and whatnot.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, you want to address that
well,
question?
if I understand the question, money is just a tool of economics. It's just a way of handling commodities, things that you want, things that people want. People want things. You have to have some medium for getting it. So if somebody can come up with a system where you don't have money or don't need money, well, they once had that system, I understand, thousands of years ago. They called it barter. But they found out that got to be a little bit cumbersome. I mean, because sometimes if you're going to trade a herd of sheep for something else that you needed, like a sack of rice, I mean, it got to be a little wearisome, about how you're going to go about doing that.
Yes, sir.
As far as location and all of that, sheep are different from a bag of rice. And so how do you trade all of that, particularly when you might not have a transportation system for the sheep? So that's how money came into being in the first place. But if someone can come up with an idea of where you don't need to have money as a medium, well, they could present that idea to the white supremacists, of course, because they're the masters of money, and see how that goes over. Okay. But I don't think it'll go over very well, but they can do it.
They can do it. Okay, let's go to line number 1. What is your question for Neely Fuller Jr. quickly?
Good morning. Question to the previous point he was making before the last caller about they allowing so many of us, they select who they want, and that it goes from there. My question is, I've heard Mr. Fuller talk before about logic, how we should question everything, including even himself. If it's not consistent logically, then don't go along with it, don't follow. I think part of our problem is that we accept so many things and never question the source from whence it comes. A couple of months ago, real quickly here, there was a report that had come out about George Soros funding what had happened in the Black Lives Matter movement in Ferguson. Someone called in here and questioned the validity of what I was saying. However, that has proven to be true, very much so, in recent months here. And I say that to say, going along with my question, we didn't question that. We just presumed that was ours, that was something we had begun. We didn't question where did it come from, this whole concept. Who were the people running this whole campaign and this whole situations. And so my question again, Mr. Fuller, to emphasize it, and we may not be able to finish today, but going to next week, what would you say, again, to this whole thing of being weary and not trusting everything that's put before us? That so often we do have a tendency to do.
All right.
In all the 9 areas.
All right. Thank you, Brother Mal.
All right. Thank you.
Here again, cause and effect. Constructive, non-constructive. Now, saying Black Lives Matter, is that constructive? Well, you look at the results. If this causes people to think in a constructive manner, if people start thinking, well, maybe Black lives should matter. And if people act on that, if you see people acting on it, if you see black people thinking that maybe Black lives do matter and they stop killing each other, then you say, hey, then that was a constructive result. Always go by the results.
Right.
And sometimes you have to have these things said over and over and over again, until it finally starts bearing fruit. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot of things, you have to give it a good test over a period of time.
Yeah.
I don't see anything incorrect about the slogan, about saying that Black lives should matter. You probably could add the word should. All right? That makes people think about it and that they have to do something, like stop killing each other.
Right. Okay. Hey, Brother Mal, thanks for listening. Send me that article on Mr. George Soros. I want to readdress that. Okay, let's go to line number 3. Number 3. You are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Quickly. What is your question?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good, sir.
All right. Hey, Mr. Fuller, I had a question about the N-word. Now, as far as I understand, we have like a long history of using derivatives of that word to mean something positive in our history as far as African culture, prior to the Europeans using it for a derogatory word. Now, my question is, with that knowledge, if that is correct, would it be positive to use that word like we use it nowadays and we don't have non-constructive results from it?
Well, so far the word has had a non-constructive effect on the way people react to it, because it makes people depressed, it makes people fight, it makes people get angry and whatnot. I gave a compensatory definition for it because the word really doesn't have a definition. I concluded that some years ago. So I gave a compensatory definition to it that I think will work, because since the word is not going to go away. So the compensatory definition for it is that N-word means literally a victim of white supremacy. So that qualifies me. That word will fit me because I say that I'm a victim of white supremacy.
Right.
See, so anytime somebody calls me that, they're just saying you're a victim of white supremacy, because that's the only logical definition for it. I've thought of all kinds of definitions that it could have, but the way that it is used, it always points to that logical thing that, hey, if you are not a victim of white supremacy, you cannot be that N-word. But if you are a victim of white supremacy, you are the N-word. But I put it in the word guide because that way the word will work for me. When somebody calls me that, if a white person calls me the N-word, they're really calling me a victim of white supremacy, which validates exactly what I've been accusing them of in the first place, making me a victim.
Yeah.
Because victims are made. They're not born.
Yes, whether they know it or not, this is what they're saying.
Yes, but you explain it to them. You say, "Oh, you just acknowledge that I am a victim of white supremacy. Thank you very much, sir."
I definitely understand that aspect. Do you think there's a difference between the spelling, the ER, and the A, as far as how?
No, it doesn't make any difference how you say it. It means the same thing.
It means the same
thing.
It
means that you are being mistreated because of your color. That's what it means.
Wow.
If you're not mistreated because of your color, it's impossible to be that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right. So what about the history of the usage prior to them calling us that?
Oh, they say that it's derogatory. That's the trick. If you look in any dictionary, they'll say it's a derogatory term for a person of African descent, Negro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the trick. Here is the trick. They don't tell you why it's derogatory.
Don't tell you why.
And anytime someone doesn't give a definition to a word, it gives that word power. I gave it a definition.
All right. Thank you, caller. Okay, let's go back to the phone lines. Line number 2. Okay. Line number 2, you are now on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your call?
My name is Yes to God, and Matthew 7:15 says, we don't have to worry about what it said, just read it, and put in your browser YS to God, and I'll be telling you everything you need to know because justice is here today.
All righty, justice is here today. Okay.
Right, justice is here today because today is July the 15th, and Matthew 7:15 explains it all.
7:15. Okay. Something that we, I'll definitely check into that. Okay, anything else before we let you go?
My name is Yes, YS, the number 2, GOD. Put that in your browser. You'll see exactly who I am.
All righty. All right, thank you. Line number 1, you are on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.
I am just thankful for the information that you put out because as a person with a master's degree, obviously I've never read or understood as much as I've understood from your book. High school, obviously, undergrad or master's, working on a master's. And I appreciate it so much because it teaches me that I'm not crazy. In addition, when I discuss things that the mistreatment that you've spoken about to my family and friends who have not experienced it, they don't understand and accuse me of trying to be a victim. And I'll just tell you shortly, I worked at a newsroom, and an editor in front of other people called me the N-word. And I went and told another editor. He just looked at me like, and? So eventually I filed an EEO complaint. EEO did not do a full investigation. I hired a lawyer, paid the lawyer. The lawyer didn't do anything. And as a result of that one instance, when someone called me the N-word in 1999, I have then, as a result, been retaliated against when I've applied for other jobs since that time.
Mr. Fuller, you care to address that?
Well, I can address it by saying never accuse anybody of doing anything. Always on a job, ask for an investigation. Stay in the inquiry lane. I call it the 3 I's. Inquiry, investigation, indictment. Don't make the investigation and don't make the indictment. Indictment means you are accusing. It starts with an accusation. Stay in the inquiry lane. In other words, say, I want to find out if the Constitution of the United States has been violated. That's what you go to, 5th and 14th Amendment. I want to find out, in this particular instance, is this a constitutional violation?
Right.
And I want someone to investigate to find out whether or not this is true or false, or whatever it is. Does it call for an indictment? Does it call for an indictment? An indictment based on what? Somebody violating the Constitution by having done such and such a thing. See, just cite the facts and say, is this a constitutional violation? The reason you do that, you open the door for your case to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Black people don't have the money to hire lawyers. That's an old trick. They want you, well, if you got a grievance, go get a lawyer. No, you already got a lawyer. It's called the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has a duty to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States in the Northwestern Hemisphere. That's what you go for.
Right.
You open that door. When you mention the Constitution, and anything that you write, anything that you say, you should go the constitutional route.
Caller, thank you for calling. Listen, don't forget to get your copy of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and the additional word guide for purchase. You can all get that at producejustice.com. And that will help you to understand this. Also, there is a book out called The History That They Didn't Want You to Know About, and I'm reading now volumes 1 and 2. You may want to check into that. That will help you understand something. The History That They Didn't Want You to Know About, and also J.J. McCullough's The 14 Presidents Before George Washington. Those are very good publications, but the main one that you want to get is the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. This has been TalkTameItRadio.com, the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. You've been listening to it on TalkTameItRadio.com, radio the way it should be heard. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com.